British Bulldog is training harder than ever in the World Wrestling Federation and ready to take on any competitors. But I've got a vengeance for a man in the World Wrestling Federation, and that's you, Repo Man, ever since you threw me over the top rope.
So welcome back to Third Rate Content. Today, it's a bit of a different one. We're up at Golborne, Lancashire, and we're here at All Saints Church, Catholic Church, in the small town, like I said, of Golborne, in Lancashire, or Cheshire. I'm not 100% sure what it's classed as now, but I'll always know it as Lancashire. And I'm up in this area today, out of my usual sort of stamping ground, and I'm actually attending a funeral not a few miles from here today, this afternoon. I will be putting my shirt and tie on afterwards, but while I was up here, I thought I'd call in and pay my respects to my nan, who is actually buried in this churchyard. But obviously this isn't going to be of interest to a Third Rate Content video. But today we're going to be visiting another person who's interred here and buried in the churchyard here. Someone who was very important to me as a youngster, who I've pretty much looked up to and idolised in many ways, and that is the WWE, or WWF as it was back then, Superstar Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. And he is interred in this churchyard, and we're going to have a walk around, try and find the grave now, respectfully, and you can learn a few things about the great man right now. So buckle up and I'll see you out here. Davey Boy Smith was born in Golborne, near Wigan, England, on the 27th of November 1962. His parents were Sid Smith and Joyce Billington. Davey Boy had an older brother, Terence. Davey was born in his parents' flat on Lee Street in Golborne. Shortly after his birth, Davey's family and Davey emigrated to Australia, but they had returned by the time Davey was 5 years old. Davey had two younger sisters, Tracy and Joanne. One of Davey's older cousins was Tom Billington. He was 4 years older than Davey, and he lived and grew up around the corner. And of course, Tom Billington went on to be known to millions around the world as the legendary wrestling figure, the Dynamite Kid. Both Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy were trained to wrestle by Ted Bately, although there was a significant gap between them training, obviously with Dynamite Kid being a bit older, 4 years older. And Davey Boy also was partially trained by Bill Riley at his legendary Snake Pit gym in nearby Wigan, which was an unheated shack basically. It wasn't long before Davey Boy was appearing on national UK television, tag teaming with Big Daddy Shirley Crabtree, following in the footsteps of his cousin Tom Billington, and quite a few others like Steve Regal, who went on to be William Regal in the WWE and World Championship Wrestling, and of course Proto Rey Mysterio, Tom Thumb. Yeah, and their sort of job in the tag team would be to get beat up by the heel team and then make the hot tag to Big Daddy, and then he would come in and power through the opposition with his big belly. It wasn't long before Davey was spotted by one of the legendary Hart family and asked to go to Canada, once again following in his cousin's footsteps, go to Canada to Stampede, to Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling, and he took the opportunity. So at age 18, Davey Boy travelled to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it wasn't long before he was working with his cousin, Tommy Billington. And at first, the two of them feuded and had a great rivalry. But But a year or two into the run, they teamed up, and that team would go on to become what was known as the British Bulldogs, the legendary British Bulldogs. And their name and fame travelled far and wide. And it wouldn't be too much to say in a country like Japan, they became semi-divine in professional wrestling. In the professional wrestling world, they were that sought after and put on a pedestal. And a lot of this came down to their grit, their English sort of style and grit and determination. Their chain wrestling, that sort of world of sport, scientific style, combined with their athleticism, flying around the ring, along with the fact that they're compact. They look compact but ripped and built up, and then they had that North American big, strong, hard-hitting style. And all this combined made them legendary. And it was in the years between 1981 and 1984 that Davey Boy lived with one of Stu Hart's younger kids, Brett. Shared a house for 3 years, and Brett, of course, went on to become the multi-time world champion Bret the Hitman Hart, and also the adversary of Davey Boy in one of his greatest matches. It was around this time that Davey Boy Smith also met his wife-to-be, Diana Hart, who was the youngest daughter of Stu Hart and Helen Hart, and the sister of Bret Hart, and their other 10 siblings. Davey Boy Smith and Diana Hart married at the Hart House in October 1984. Their first child was Harry, who was born August the 2nd, 1985, and their daughter Georgia was born on September the 26th, 1987, both born in Calgary. Harry has gone on to be a successful professional wrestler in his own right, with stints in the WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and all around the world. Davey Boy Smith and Tom Billington were signed to the WWE in late 1984 alongside other Stampede favourites Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. They feuded with Neidhart and Hart, who were now known as the Hart Foundation and managed by Jimmy Hart, no relation to Bret Hart, and the Dream Team, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. This culminated in the British Bulldogs defeating the Dream Team at WrestleMania 2 on April the 7th, 1986 for the WWE WWF Tag Team titles. The Bulldogs' run with the WWE Tag Team titles was a decent 9 months, but it was cut short somewhat by Tom Billington sustaining a back injury. It was a nasty injury that probably heralded the beginning of the end of Tom Billington's professional wrestling career. During the last months of the Bulldogs' reign as tag champs, Davey Boy Smith defended the belts with various stand-in tag partners while Tommy Billington recovered from his injuries. Davey Boy lost the tag team titles to his brother-in-law and Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart after basically having to defend them for the last part of the match, the title match, on his own after Tom Billington had become debilitated by being hit by Jimmy Hart's, the Hart Foundation's manager's megaphone. So that was the end of their title run, and this was on the 26th of January 1987. After losing the titles, the Bulldogs had notable feuds with the Islanders, the Hart Foundations, and ultimately the Rougeau brothers. And it was the Rougeau brothers incident which was really after months of sustained pranks from the Bulldogs, primarily I believe Tommy Billington and Davey Boy, that Jacques Rougeau actually struck Tom Billington, unawares, with his fist packed with a roll of quarters. Obviously, this sort of sucker punch caught Tommy Billington unawares and knocked quite a lot of his teeth out. And the Dynamite Kid was regarded, probably rightfully so, as one of the toughest guys in wrestling, a real tough man sport. At that time, he was one of the toughest. And this really knocked his confidence, and it kind of led to one of the reasons why the British Bulldog's run in WWE ended. And when I say pranks, it really is how you look at it. You could sort of look at it as bullying, borderline bullying, because the pranks included drugging people with sedatives, putting lit cigarettes in the bag that Jake the Snake kept his snake in, the actual snake in the bag, so that it would bite him when he opened the bag. It was during this time that Davey Boy and his family moved to Florida, and Tommy Billington moved back to England. Soon after, Davey Boy Smith returned to the WWF as a singles competitor, the British Bulldog. Sky TV, their coverage of the WWF was booming in Britain, and him signing at this time was a real boom for the biggest professional wrestling company in the world. Smith made his televised return to the WWF on an episode of Superstars on the 27th of October 1990, where he defeated the Brooklyn Brawler. And I'll just add here, Dynamite Kid never returned to the WWE, and his injuries overcame him, and he retired from professional wrestling in the mid-90s. And he actually passed away on the 5th of December 2018 after having spent considerable years living as an invalid. Smith spent the next 2 years defeating various mid-carders, including the Warlord, and on October the 3rd, 1991, he won a 20-man battle royal at the Albert Hall on one of the supercards. And then in the 1992 Royal Rumble on the 19th of January, he had a really awesome performance and lasted ages, and he eliminated Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, Jerry Saggs from the Nasty Boys, and Haku, before finally being eliminated by the eventual winner, Ric Flair. So Davey's successes led to quite a promising and exciting time for him in 1992. And it wasn't too long after this that the World Wrestling Federation announced that they would be holding their second biggest pay-per-view of 1992, SummerSlam, at Wembley Stadium, the home of legends. And to this date, 2023, it was the only time that WWE has held a major pay-per-view in the British Isles. The main event for the card was an intercontinental title match, unprecedented at the time, to have secondary title, the intercontinental title, in the main event. The champion was Bret the Hitman Hart, and the challenger was Davey Boy Smith. I was in attendance at Wembley in 1992. My dad took me, and it was absolutely amazing to see two of my favourite wrestlers fighting for the prize, and it was like I couldn't lose because I love Bret the Hitman Hart and I love Davey Boy Smith, so either guy was a winner for me. Of course, someone had to lose, and it wasn't Davey Boy Smith. Bret Hart took the lost the championship, and Davey Boy Smith walked out of Wembley, the reigning and newly crowned WWF in them days intercontinental champion. Amazing scenes. So this moment was to be savoured and was the zenith of Davey Boy Smith's career in WWE. 3 months later, the British Bulldog lost the Intercontinental title to Shawn Michaels, whose career was in the upswing, on 14th of November at Saturday Night's Main Event. And by the end of the year, he no longer worked for Vince McMahon's professional wrestling sports entertainment company. Bret Hart has said that Davey Boy and the Ultimate Warrior lost their jobs due to receiving packages of human growth hormone in the post. And because the company had changed its official policy towards steroids and enhancements due to being under intense scrutiny by the US health authorities and legal profession, these things had changed. The 90s was in full flow and attitudes were changing. In January of 1993, Smith signed with the second biggest professional wrestling organisation in the world, World Championship Wrestling. Being one of the first mega signings to come over from WWE to WCW, it wasn't long before Smith was at the top of the card, tag teaming with Sting and feuding with top antagonists Sid Vicious and Big Van Vader. And it was also during this time that Davey Boy Smith was present at one of the most notorious and hilarious, unintentionally hilarious moments in professional wrestling, the debut of the Shockmaster, and Davey Boy added some, again, unintentional commentary and reaction to the events. Davey Boy Smith's name is one of the names always called out when it's mentioned of the greatest wrestler never to win the world title. But Davey Boy did actually win the world title from Vader on a tour of the UK in 1993, and he won the belt, but unfortunately the decision was reversed shortly afterwards, and the title win was never credited. So he came very close to winning the world title. And he also beat Vader at a pay-per-view by disqualification. Again, he didn't win the title, but you don't win the title via DQ and countouts. And it was during this run that Smith also had more than one opportunity at Lord Stephen Regal, his fellow countryman, his fellow Englishman. He had an opportunity to win his WCW television title, but was unsuccessful on both occasions. Unfortunately, Smith's time in World Championship Wrestling came to a premature end when, after about 12 months with the company, he got into an altercation with a man in a restaurant, and severely injured the man. At first, WCW stuck by Smith, but when the legal costs and the fee, the damages award that were going to be awarded to the injured party started to mount up, WCW ended Smith's contract, like I said, after about 12 months with the company. Smith returned to the WWE at SummerSlam on August the 29th, 1994, where he got involved immediately with his brothers-in-law's feud between Bret and Owen Hart. He was involved in a lot of top matchups, tag teaming with Bret against Owen and Jim Neidhart. He appeared in the Survivor Series in a 10-man elimination match. His partners were the Intercontinental Champion Razor Ramon, 123 Kid and the Head Shrinkers. And he was involved in the storyline where Bret Hart lost his WWF World title to Bob Backlund via nefarious methods by Bob Backlund. Yeah, that's my dad just walking around the churchyard in front of us, because other than my nan and granddad being buried here, my dad and myself were related to quite a lot of people in this churchyard, and we don't really get a chance to visit very often for us living in Shrewsbury. And it's only an hour and a half away, but we only really come up for funerals and the like nowadays. Around this time, Smith entered the Royal Rumble second to Shawn Michaels first, and also exited the Royal Rumble second to last, with Shawn Michaels winning it in one of the all-time great finishes of a Royal Rumble. Around this time, Smith turned heel for his first time ever in WWE, and also had a world title shot against Diesel, which again he won by disqualification, but didn't win the World Championship belt. In 1996, while Shawn Michaels was WWF champion, Smith got into a feud with him because Shawn Michaels, kayfabe, had been hitting on his wife Diana, which angered Smith, and he wanted to take Michaels his title. He wrestled Michaels to a draw at In Your House 8, Beware of the Dog. And then they had a rematch at June the 23rd at King of the Ring, where Smith failed to win the title, again coming very close to winning the coveted WWE Championship. In 1997, the WWE introduced the European Championship, and the inaugural winner of it was Davey Boy Smith, who won the coveted prize after winning a tournament and defeating his brother-in-law and tag partner Owen Hart in the tournament finals. Davey Boy Smith and Owen Hart won the WWF tag team titles from the Smoking Guns. Hart and Smith lost the belts though to Stone Cold, Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. And Davey Boy Smith lost the European title to Michaels once again, controversially at an event, after Michaels persuaded Vince McMahon that it would be better that he won and take the belt from Smith. Soon after this, on the 9th of November, at Survivor Series 1997 in Montreal, in an event that was to go on to be known as the Montreal Screwjob, an extremely controversial decision was made. Shawn Michaels once again took the World Wrestling Federation title from Bret Hart in a moment that was known as the Screwjob, and thus ending Bret Hart's time with the company and also Davey Boy Smith as they both immediately left for World Championship Wrestling. If you're not sure what the Montreal Screwjob is or want to find out, it's easy to look up, but it would take me hours to explain it all today on the video, and it's beyond the remit. Back in World Championship Wrestling for his second stint, Davey Boy Smith teamed up with Steve McMichael and challenged for the Tag Team Championships unsuccessfully, but he sustained some injuries, and a very serious one when he took a bump in the middle of the ring on a hidden trapdoor that was put there for the Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, in his time in short spell in WCW, and he took it awkwardly, and it caused a severe spinal injury. Didn't paralyze him, but it caused a severe infection that affected him for 6 months and hospitalized him. While convalescing from the injury, Smith's World Championship Wrestling contract was terminated due to his inability to perform. Being at a low ebb after having spent time in a full body cast, Davey was feeling down, but luckily his brother-in-law Owen Hart arranged for Vince McMahon to contact him, and it was discussed that the WWE would re-sign Davey to a contract and he would be working again alongside Owen. Davey was immediately feeling like he was back in the wrestling game. Sadly, Owen died in an unfortunate and terrible in-ring accident 2 weeks after these well-meaning negotiations took place. Davey did go on to work with the WWE until mid-2000, but Davey was still in a lot of pain from his broken back infection, and also his sister Tracy and his mum had passed away. And Tracy was one of his best friends, so he was very much down, but he couldn't go without being in pain, and he got back on the medication, and by the fall of winter 2000 he was back in rehab again, and WWE did terminate his contract eventually. In early May of 2002, Davey Boy did realise one of his dreams and wrestled a tag team match, well, 3 tag team matches with his son Harry in Manitoba, Canada. Unfortunately, Davey Boy Smith died early in the morning of May the 18th, 2002 in Fairmont due to heart failure. Very sad end to a great man. But before anyone's quick to say drugs were involved or anything like that, do remember that Davey Boy Smith and others who wrestled in the 80s and early 90s wrestled extremely grueling work program, wrestling between 6 and 10 times a week, and of course the pressure was on to achieve a certain look that was expected, and nobody said to him, how you doing achieving this, how you doing it. They were expected to just do it, go out there and do it, and they all did, and they did amazingly and worked hard and entertained millions around the world. Unfortunately, Davey Boy Smith was amongst a huge wave of professional wrestlers from his era who all died very young, a lot of them for heart failure, and their bodies just basically gave up. So it is an incredibly hard job. It was, and it still is, on the body and mentally when you're out on the road all the time. So anyway, rest in peace, Davey Boy Smith. I've got to say, this absolutely gorgeous little churchyard in Golborne looks beautiful on this early June day.
Here we are at the actual graveside of Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, David Smith. But the reason why Davey Boy got the name Davey Boy Smith was a little bit of a mix-up when he was first born. It was handwritten, the actual birth certificate, and in the column where it should have said sex, they didn't fill that in. They just put on the column where it said name, put Davey Boy, whereas the boy should have been in the sex column. So that mix-up kind of led to the legendary name of Davey Boy Smith. Yeah, I've been looking through some classic British Bulldog moments, sort of researching before I came here today, and one of my most favourite was when the British Bulldogs won the WWF tag team titles from the dream team of Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Greg Valentine at WrestleMania 2. It was fantastic seeing that. Obviously I didn't watch that happening at the time. I watched it years later, but it was great to see both Davey Boy and the Dynamite Kid raise the titles up. But they had, as well as Captain Lou Albano in their corner, they had Ozzy Osbourne, and it was just amazing to see those three in the ring after their victory.
Ozzy looks wired here, to be fair.
Fantastic, man. The British Bulldogs forever! Oh, man!
Got the action figures here of Smith in his British Bulldog gear from when he won the Intercontinental title, and to the right, his Attitude Era jeans attire.
After they left the WWF in 1989, they went back to Stampede, back to Stu Hart's promotion. They also did some tours around the world, and in Japan was their tag team match. Joe and Dean Malenko versus the British Bulldog in All Japan. Amazing match. It's on YouTube. Yeah, and as well as the absolutely the main event match at SummerSlam 92, which I attended. My dad, who's over there, took me. As well as the match, the Intercontinental title match, the unprecedented main event Intercontinental title match, which was amazing. Bret Hart and Davey Boy had another match 3 years later. And in the commentary, Jerry Lawler said that Davey Boy was wearing the exact same tights, very similar to these, but I don't think he was. But that match was even better
Than the SummerSlam match,
in my opinion, and there was a lot of blood in it, but it was a superb match.
Yeah, this replica of the tag team belts won by the British Bulldogs from the Dream Team. This is my favourite design of the tag team belts, designed by Reggie Parks, who made titles for both the NWA and the WWF or WWE. during that era, the 1980s, and he made the iconic winged eagle belt, which was made so iconic by Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. Yeah, there has as well been a petition. I have actually signed it online to have a star, Hall of Fame star, put in the pavement at Wigan for the British Bulldog. It's still on now. They're not far off 5,000 signatures last time I looked, and I'll leave a link to it down below if you want to sign it. I think it's pretty worthwhile to recognise the great man. Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, was added to the WWE Hall of Fame in the class of 2020. Posthumously, of course. It's commonly misconstrued that the British Bulldogs were best friends, but they weren't actually. They weren't even friends, I don't believe. They were enemies, but they were like 4 or 5 years apart in age, and they came into wrestling obviously at slightly different times, and they didn't team up as the British Bulldogs or as a tag team until they both got to Stampede Wrestling in Canada, run by Stu Hart, because Davey Boy arrived in 1981 and Dynamite Kid had been there since 1978, so there was that gap, and there was also quite a bit of a falling out towards the end of the tag team after they'd had their run in WWF. Davey Boy actually copyrighted the very astutely copyrighted the British Bulldog title, and he actually, I believe from reading Bret Hart's book, that he offered Tom Billington in on it, but he didn't want to be any part of it, and then he held that against Davey Boy when he went back to the WWF, holding the copyright. Yeah, after they left the WWF, the British Bulldogs had like a dream match. It was put, I think it was held in the American Wrestling Association, the AWA, but it was put together by Japanese sort of super fans television sort of station, and it was the match between the British Bulldogs and the Rock and Roll Express, you know, the sort of iconic NWA tag team champions of the 80s. Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. There's only 10 minutes of it to watch, the last 10 minutes of the match on YouTube now. It's worth watching, but I wish I could watch the whole half an hour match. And this was the only time that these two teams ever wrestled each other. So you've got to say hats off to the Japanese superfan promoters for putting this together in a cable package. Yeah, so just behind the grave of the British Bulldog is the grave of his family members. I think Tracy Bernadette Smith, Joy Smith, and Sid Smith. And Sid only passed away, I think, in February of 2023. And Sid lived in Golborne in the same house that he'd lived in for years, right up until his passing earlier on this year, 2023. Yeah, it's a very tasteful memorial stone. So that was this week's Third Rate Content. Thanks for watching to the end. Hope you enjoyed. It's a bit of a different one this week. We might do more stuff like this in the future. But yeah, very interesting. It was like I say, a figure that I had a lot of interest in when I was a young man, and meant a lot to me. And it's also a double significance because my nan is actually just buried in this graveyard as well. So I visited her today and visited Davey Boy Smith, two big figures from my childhood. So like I said, if you enjoyed today, please think about leaving a like. Subscribing, all subscriptions help the channel at this point, and please comment. I do love a good comment. I read them all,
and I reply where applicable. So if I don't see you soon, I'll see you 3 times as soon. Third rate content, sign out, bye bye.